We're recording. We're recording. All right, so here we go. So we're not going to get through section 3.1 today because it is an extraordinarily long section, and also because I talked for almost 20 minutes because we had to get some housekeeping stuff handled. But here we go. So section or chapter 3 is all about quadratic equations and also just higher order equations in general, equations that you guys have to learn to solve and you may not have ever solved before. So we're going to start out with quadratic. All right. So the graph of a quadratic equation, if you were to graph that, remember a quadratic looks like this, right? By the way, remember that's a good old quadratic. If I graph him, what's he look like? He's a parabola. Okay, so he's a parabola. All right, good. So we know that a parabola, technically a parabola can only open two ways. There's only two pictures of a parabola. He can open up like this, right? And he can open down like this. Now, every once in a while, you'll see a picture where you've got something that's like sideways, like this. That's not actually a parabola. That's a parametric equation. That's something we get to in trig. So we're not interested in anything that may be sideways. We're only looking at up and down. That's it. Okay. All right. So the vertex of your parabola is the point where it changes direction. So it's either the very lowest point if it's pointing up. Yeah. Or the very highest point if it's pointing down. It just depends on which way. Okay, it's opening. And we represent the vertex as an ordered pair and we call him HK. Well, that sounds familiar. Just like a circle, right? A circle centers HK. So it turns out that a vertex for a parabola is also HK. All right, a parabola is symmetric about its axis of origin. Okay, so that just means that it's the vertical line that would kind of cut through this vertex here, just like that. So sometimes if it's sitting at the origin, it's actually the y-axis, which is pretty handy. But if it's been moved somewhere, it's just whatever vertical line is cutting through that vertex, okay? And here's how you find it. We know a vertical line is x equals a number. That's a vertical line. So if h is our x coordinate, then our axis of origin is just x equals h, where this is the x coordinate from the vertex. So if you know the vertex, you automatically know the axis of origin. You just set x equal to that, okay? All right, now there's two different forms of a parabola that you're gonna need to be familiar with. You're really comfortable with general form. You may not even realize that's what that was. But general form is the form that you've been factoring and putting into the quadratic formula your whole life, right? That's the general form of a parabola. Okay, so if we take a peek at it even more, if your first term, if your x squared term is positive, your parabola opens up. And I think you guys knew that, or at least you could kind of deduce that from looking at it. If your first term is negative, then it's going to open down. Okay, that makes sense, easy enough. Now, it's not really easy to find the vertex from that form. So we need a formula. So again, we're already starting out right out of the gate with you having to remember something. But all of these things that you're learning, they are going to come up on the SAT and the ACT for you. Okay, believe me, because I'm studying with my daughter and these things are coming up. This was a question we just did a couple of weeks ago. And so if you have standard or general form like this, how do you find the vertex of that parabola? Well, the x coordinate, you have to use this little formula. It's going to be the opposite of b over 2a. Okay, and so it would be the opposite sign of whatever b is divided by 2 times whatever a is. That's going to give you the x coordinate. Then to find the y coordinate, you have to plug this value in and solve for y. And that's going to give you the y coordinate. Now we're going to practice all of this, so don't worry about it. Sometimes it's too hard to understand unless you're doing it, but that's the deal. Okay, If you have standard form, oh, super easy. It's fantastic, okay? Because standard form is going to immediately give you the vertex. Just like with a circle, you could immediately get the vertex. So you have standard form if you have parentheses with the x inside and it's squared. Now remember, a circle standard form had y minus k parentheses squared. Remember that? And that would be a whole circle. We're just almost taking half the circle, kind of, if you squint when you look at a parabola. So we only want the x squared, that's it. Okay, so this is your standard form. Again, if a is positive, whatever's outside the parenthesis, you're up. If a is negative, you're down. Okay, let's look at vertex here. If this is the official standard form, your x coordinate, your h here, look at his sign. He's going to be the opposite sign of what you see in the formula. But then look at k. K is not. This is the sign. Okay, this, I don't know how to write that. How should I write that? If h is the opposite sign, but k is the sign, what should I write? How about just the same sign? I don't know. Make a note so you know what I'm talking about, because that might be weird. Oh. Okay, so when we pull out the h, we're going to change a sign. K, we're not. We're going to keep it. And so we just want to make sure with a circle, we changed both of them, right? It was the opposite sign of both. So this time we only take the opposite of h, but we take k. Yeah, but we're keeping the other one. Okay. All right, let's go through some more stuff down here. This is kind of like everything you ever did not want to know about a parabola. You're about to learn it, right? And then we'll do some examples. Okay, so then what if we want to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept? Okay, so remember, you're either looking at this situation or this situation. So let's think about this. Okay, to find the x-intercept where it touches the x-axis, you're going to set y equal to 0 and solve for x. Okay, well, if this is our formula, and I've already set y equal to 0 and I'm solving for x, that means what you've been doing your whole life by factoring or using the quadratic formula, all those answers, x equals a number, all those answers you've been finding x-intercepts. You just may not have known it. That's how you find an x-intercept, is you set the equation equal to 0 and you solve it. You can either factor it or put it in a quadratic formula, but all those little answers are actually x-intercepts that you've been finding. Okay. Now to find the y-intercept, it's much easier. You're just going to set x equal to 0 and then you're done. Okay. All right, we'll go over that again. All right, what about the domain? Okay, well, if you look at your options, no matter which one you have, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So your domain is always going to be, for a parabola, all real numbers, always. Okay, your range is what is going to be different, because if we're opening up, our range starts here with our vertex and goes to infinity. If our parabola opens down, it starts with negative infinity to the vertex. Okay, so you're going to have an infinity involved no matter which one, and a hard bracket on the other number. Okay, all right, and we already talked about the axis of well, I put axis of origin. Axis of symmetry is the same thing. Let me go back up here and put axis of symmetry also. Okay, sometimes it's called axis of origin, sometimes it's called axis of symmetry. So depending on, yeah, there you go. All right, okay, so that was a lot of stuff to remember. That was just words. So let's do some real examples so we can kind of figure out what we're talking about. Okay. These are always easier. I pulled these right off of my math lab, so some of you might have these exact problems. If not, they'll be pretty darn similar. Okay, here we go. So they give you a parabola and they want you to pick which one of these is the equation. So if you happen to notice, all of these are standard form. And I know that because I have a parenthesis with the square. Okay, so I'm going to write up here, then standard form is a parenthesis x minus h squared plus k. That's standard form. Let me erase this so I have more room. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. All right, so first thing I want to make sure of is that I pick an equation that shows my parabola is opening up. That means I better have a positive out here in front of the parenthesis, but everybody's positive. So that didn't narrow anybody down, but it's always good to check. Okay, then the only other piece of information I have is the vertex. So according to my graph, my vertex is going to be -4, +1. Okay. All right, well, I look back up here, they all have some version of 4 and 1. So now I have to be really careful. All right, so this is H and this is K. Exactly. So if you look up here in your equation, I want the actual real K. So I want a +1 hanging around in the back. But inside the parenthesis, I want -H. So if I want -4, what's going to be in the parenthesis? +4. So I'm looking for a +4 +1, and it's going to be B. Okay, there we go. Does that make sense? So remember, it's going to be the same sign for K, the opposite sign for H. Okay, opposite for H, same for K. That's what we're looking at. Okay, everybody all right with that? We're going to scooch up. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, we're still opening up. So I want to make sure I'm positive. All of these are positive. So again, that didn't really narrow it down, but it's always good to check. All right, let's find our vertex. Our vertex is going to be 3, -4. Okay, so here's our H, here's our K. All right, we want the opposite for H inside the parentheses. So I'm going to be looking for a -3, and I want the same for K. So a -4. So which one is going to be correct? Yeah, there we go. Okay, easy enough. Okay, so that's pretty nice. You know, standard form is a great thing. All right, let's look down here at the bottom. Okay, I'm getting a little concerned because I don't see any parentheses. So I'm a little worried that maybe I possibly have general form down here. I don't really know what I have, but let's just take it one step at a time and see if I can match my equation. All right, well, first of all, I'm opening down. Everybody see that? If I'm opening down, that means my A is negative. So I'm looking for a negative out there in front of x squared. That means I can eliminate B and I can eliminate D. Everybody agree with that? Since it opens down. So my A is going to be negative. Okay, then let's get my vertex. Okay, my vertex is going to be 0, -2. Okay, well, gosh, that's a little hard to see here. I don't see anything that matches up perfectly. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our standard form and let's fill our vertex in. Let's fill our information in, clean it up, and see if we can match one of these equations. Okay, I don't know exactly what A is, but I know it's negative. Does everybody agree with that? So let's put a -1 out front for A. X minus, okay, 0 is H, so I'm going to put a 0 in, plus K. Well, my K is -2. So there we go. Everybody okay with that so far? It's a little strange. Okay, let's clean it up. All right, X minus 0 is just going to be X, right? Okay, So then I really don't need those parentheses anymore. I'm going to have a negative times an x squared minus 2. That's my equation. So do we see that as a choice? Yeah. So my answer is going to be C. So sometimes you just have to go for it, plug it in yourself and clean it up, and then it'll make sense. Okay? All right, everyone okay with that one? All right, let's try another one. Okay, here we go. All right, well, I definitely do not see standard form there. So, all right, here we go. Okay, I'm opening up. So if I'm opening up, my A is positive. That means I'm going to go ahead and eliminate C because I shouldn't have a negative out front. Okay, then I'm going to find my vertex. My next step, my vertex is -4, 0. Okay, so now let's go ahead and plug, since I don't see standard form, let's plug him into standard form and then we'll clean him up. Okay, so I'm going to be really precise here and say f of x. You don't have to do that if you don't want. Since my A is positive, I can put a 1 out here if I want to, or I don't really have to. I can just kind of forget it. Okay, I'm supposed to do x minus h. So x minus -4 is x plus 4, and that's squared. Okay, and then my k is 0 plus 0. Okay, all right. So my 1 I really don't need, and I don't see anything else out here that looks like x plus 4 squared. But what can I do with this to clean it up? I can FOIL it because that means there's 2 of them, right? There's 2 of them there. So here we go. I'm going to have x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16. Somehow I lost my f of x along the way, sorry. And it turns out we're looking at B. And that's our answer for that parabola. So if you are trying to put your parabola in general form, you really can't jump straight there. You always have to go through standard form to get there. So find your vertex, find your A, it's either positive or negative, put it in your form, okay? And then if you have to, expand it out, right? FOIL it out and then clean it up and you'll get what you need, okay? Everybody okay with that? All right, well, here we go. Let's try some without a picture. Let's go the other direction. Okay, so in this case, they give us standard form. They want the vertex. That's all you got to do. And they want it as an ordered pair, so make sure you put it in parentheses. Okay, don't worry about the 3 out front. That just means A is positive and it has a vertical stretch put on it. That's all that means. We don't need him to find our vertex. So what's our vertex going to be? Be careful with your signs. Okay, so it's going to be 2, 4. Everybody agree with that? Yep. Let's think about that, because remember, our form is this. That's our form. So we want the opposite of what's going on in here. So we just put a 2. And then we want exactly what you see there, which is K. Okay, does that make sense? All right, well, let's try the same thing, but look what we have here. We have general form. So this is not going to work for us. Okay, that means we have to go back to the front page and find the formula for general form. Okay, so if you remember, here's how we find our vertex for general form. We're going to use this for the x coordinate, then we're going to plug that in to find the y coordinate. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if we remember how to find all this. So A is going to be 4, B is going to be 8, C is going to be 1, right? Remember all that time in intermediate algebra when we were factoring and I made you write A, B, and C like 5 million times and you guys were like, this is ridiculous. Well, this is why, because I knew one day you would need it and you need to be able to get it super fast, right? Okay. All right, so to find our x coordinate for the vertex, we want opposite of b over 2a. That's how we're going to find h. This is our x coordinate. This is h. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take opposite of b, or -8, over 2 times 4. This is going to be -8 over 8. What does our h end up being? -1. Okay, everybody see how we got h? That's our x coordinate there. Okay, now to get our y coordinate, that's our k, we're going to plug -1 in and see what we get. So what we're finding is f of -1. We're just plugging -1 into our equation. So I'm going to have 4 times -1 squared plus 8 times -1 plus 1. Okay. Then I'm going to clean it up. -1 squared is just 1 times 4. All right, 8 times -1, that's -8, plus 1 should give you a -3 when you get all that fixed up. And then that's going to be your k. And so there's your vertex. Okay. So this gave me -4, plus 1 was -3, and that's my k. All right. So I found my h. I plugged it in here, cleaned it up, and I got my k. All right. Okay, so on your test, then you can probably see you're going to have to be able to find both. I'm going to give you a standard form and a general form. Okay, you all right? You good? What's bothering you? Everybody okay? You're just tired? Okay. All right. So here's our formula. We find it and then we plug it in. Okay. All right. Well, now this is kind of written weird, but let's pretend this is part of that. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So here's our function. And we're going to answer questions A, B, and C on our function. All right. So here's our parabola. First of all, does this guy open up or down? Down. How'd you know he opened down? The A is negative. So since he's negative, we know he's opening down. Okay, good. All right, so that means A wants you to tell them, and it's going to be a little drop-down box on my math lab, is this the maximum or the minimum value? Maximum. Okay, good. So what that means is if your parabola opens down, you have a maximum value. If your parabola opens up, you have a minimum value. Okay, you sure you're okay? Okay, all right. You just have that, like, I want it to be Friday look on your face. All right, so be able to pick if it's doing that. All right, then it wants to know either the minimum value or if you had chosen maximum, the maximum value. So what is it asking for? It's asking for the vertex. This is what it's asking for in this question. Okay, but it's separated. So this wants the x coordinate. So this is h. This is k. So this question wants the vertex. Let me fix my arrow so it makes a little more sense. Okay. It wants h here because that's the x coordinate, and it wants k here, and it wants us to find that. All right. And then it's going to want the domain and range. Okay, so we have to go back up here to this formula to find our vertex. All right, so we are in general form, which means we're going to have to use these formulas. So let's practice again what we just did. Okay, I didn't leave much room because I drew that stupid thing right in the middle. Okay, let me just make sure this says max. All right, so first of all, if I'm going to find h, that's my x coordinate, I'm going to find negative b over 2a. That's the formula. So I go up here, my b is 4. So I'm going to put negative 4 because I want opposite of b. Over 2 times a, what's my a here? Negative 2. Oh, this stupid problem's going to have another one. That's a 1. Okay. What's negative 4 divided by negative 4? 1. Okay. So that is my x coordinate right there. It's going to be 1. All right. Now we have to find k. If we're going to find k, I'm just going to take 1 and I'm going to plug it into this. Everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug it in. So that's going to be negative 2 times 1 squared plus 4 times 1 minus 7. Okay. 1 squared is 1, so that's negative 2 plus 4 minus 7. All right, that gives me a positive 2 minus 7, negative 5. So I squeezed in a little negative 5 there. So this vertex that we see up here is going to be 1, negative 5. That's my maximum point. That's my vertex. But I had to separate it, and I just had to read it and figure out who goes where there. Okay. All right. C wants the domain. What's the domain of every single parabola in the whole wide world? Good. All real numbers. Now it wants interval notation, so we're going to have to do that. Okay. Now it wants the range. The range of a parabola has one of the infinities with a parenthesis, and then it has the y coordinate of the vertex with a hard bracket. So since we're opening down, since we have a maximum point, our range is going to start at negative infinity and go all the way up to here. And the y coordinate of that is going to be negative 5, and we use a hard bracket. And that's going to be our range. Does that make sense? So negative infinity all the way up to here, and we use the y coordinate because the range deals with the y's, and we put a hard bracket on that. Okay. All right, good. Huh? Say that one more time. Oh, okay. So it's going to be a maximum because we have a negative. And if it's negative, it opens down and you have a max. So that might be something we want to make sure is on the front. Okay. So if it opens up, you have a minimum value. And if it opens down, you're going to have a maximum value. That might be something you want to add just to make sure, you know, and that's your vertex. Okay. All right. Okay, let's keep going then. Okay, page 4. So this came right off again. This whole thing I just kind of copied and pasted. So it's a long section, but it's mostly just because I have these gigantic problems on here. All right, here we go. So we have all kinds of stuff to do here. This is one of those multi-part problems, but I just put the whole thing. And then they had drop boxes, so I put the drop boxes all the way down so you could see them. All right, use the vertex and the x-intercepts to sketch the graph of the quadratic function. Okay, give the equation of the parabola's axis of symmetry. Okay, use the graph to determine the domain and the range. So we actually have 4 things to do. We're going to have to graph it. We're going to have to give the axis of symmetry. We're going to have to find the domain, and we have to find the range. All right. They told us to graph it using 2 things. When you go to graph in my math lab, here's your parabola button, right? It's this guy right here. It's not the line. It's not the absolute value V. And it's not the sideways, because we already said that's not an actual parabola. So you have to know it's this button. When you click on that button, it's going to want 2 things from you. it's going to want the vertex, and it's going to want the x-intercept. Okay, no, let me make sure of that. Is it x-intercept or y-intercept that it wants? Oh, no, it's the y. Sorry, guys, it's the y-intercept. So it's going to want the vertex and the y-intercept. That's what it's going to want from you, okay? That's what it's going to want, vertex and the y-intercept. Okay, so that's what we're going to have to find given this little formula. Okay, so are we going to open up or down? Up. How do we know it's up? It's positive out here. There's no negative. That's how we know. If this is positive or up, if there's a negative in front, it's down. Okay, good. All right, let's find our vertex. So he's general form, which means we're back to the good old opposite of b over 2a for h. Okay, so here we go. So our a is going to be 1. Our b is going to be 3. We don't need c, but if we did, he's -4. Okay. All right, so my h is going to be opposite of b, so -3 over 2 times a, which is 1. That's going to be -3/2. That's a real pain in the butt, but there it is. Okay, so sometimes I think it's easier. Now they're going to want, if they wanted the vertex, which they don't, they would want it as a fraction. I think it's easier to graph if I think of decimals. So kind of over here, I'm just going to remind myself that's actually a -1.5, so that when I go and do graph it, I have it. Okay, now I'm going to do f of -3/2 or -1.5, right? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to have -3/2 squared or -1.5 squared plus 3 times -3/2 minus 4. All right, now we can do that by hand, but remember, you have, well, you may not have a fancy schmancy calculator, so we better do it by hand. I forgot it's college algebra. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. If we square this, we're going to get 9/4 minus 9/2 minus 4. Okay, so I squared the top and the bottom. 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4. These just multiply the numerators. 3 times -3/2 minus 4. Okay, now we're going to have to combine some like terms here. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2. So this turns into 18/4. And then if I want to put this 4 over 1 and multiply top and bottom by 4, I get 16/4. Now you would never have anything this complicated on a test, but my math lab has this, so I just want to make sure you can get through it if you come up to this problem. All right, so once I make a denominator of 4 for everybody, now I have 9/4 minus 18/4 minus 16/4 gives me an oh so lovely -25/4. Okay, so my vertex is -3/2, -25/4. Okay, I have no idea where that is because I'm just not really a fraction girl. So if you want to rewrite this, put this in your calculator. If I do -3 divided by 2, that's -1.5. If I do -25 divided by 4, that's -6.25. So just to kind of give you an idea of what you're graphing, sometimes that's helpful, okay? So that you at least know where to go. All right, well, we have our vertex, so we're going to be able to graph him in a minute, but we also need our y-intercept, okay? Ted and the weed eater, I'm telling you. Okay, so now we need the y-intercept. So we're going to come up here and we're going to plug in 0 for x. So to find the y-intercept, plug in 0 for x. Okay, so it's like finding f of 0. So we're going to have 0 squared plus 3 times 0 minus 4. That gives us negative 4. So our y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 4. Okay, so we have a vertex and we have a y-intercept. So let's talk about how we're going to graph this. Everybody okay up to that point? I know this was a pain in the butt. The other ones aren't bad like this. Okay, so we're going to click the parabola button, and then all of a sudden you've got this parabola, okay? And the first thing you're going to click is the vertex. That's what it wants first. Okay, so my vertex is going to be negative 1.5 and negative 6.25. Just do the best you can. There's my vertex, okay? So I went negative 1.5, negative 6.25. There's my vertex. All right, once you click your vertex, your parabola is like this. Like, which way do you want me to go? How wide do you want me to be? That's why you have to have a y-intercept, because then once you click your y-intercept, it tells it how wide to be and which way to open. So my y-intercept is negative 4. So then I'm going to click here. And all of a sudden, bam, it's locked in place. You hit save and you're done with the graph. That's going to automatically draw you a really nice parabola. Okay? Click your vertex first, then click your y-intercept, and it'll draw it for you. And you don't have to do anything else. Sound good? Okay. So once you click those, that part's done. All right, now it wants the axis of symmetry. Remember, the axis of symmetry is just this imaginary line that cuts through the middle of the parabola. That's all that is. So it wants to know, what's the equation of this line? Well, if you flip back to the first page, it tells you it's going to be x equals h. So in this case, x equals negative 3/2. That's what it wants. That's the equation of the line. It wants the whole equation. Okay. Does that sound okay with everybody? A little strange, but that's all it is. All right. Now it wants the domain. Okay. Now, normally we use interval notation, but this is the problem that just keeps on giving, right? So this wants it in set builder form. So let's think about this. What is the domain of every parabola in the whole wide world? Yeah. Yeah. So since I don't see negative infinity to positive infinity, I'm going to choose x as a real number. Okay. All right. Let's also think about what would be our range. Well, our range, if we wrote it in interval notation, is going to start here at negative 6.25, or sorry, it wants a fraction. Negative 25/4, and go all the way to infinity. But unfortunately, that's not an option. It wants you to choose from this drop-down box and then put a number in here. So for this particular problem, what we're going to say is that it is greater than or equal to negative 25/4. That's your answer. Okay, you just kind of have to think about how it would be reworded there. It's the same thing. Does that look okay? Okay, because if you're going up, it'll be greater than or equal to. If you're going down, it would be the less than or equal to. And then you use that vertex. No, yeah, you don't ever have to worry about those, because we're definitely, that's a good question, because we're including that. Yeah, good. Okay. All right, let me see. Well, I'd love to do another one, but these things take kind of a while. So I think, oh, we can do it. We can squeeze it in. Sorry, because it's standard form. I know, I just broke Alyssa's heart. I just in a million pieces. And she's always so good, never says a word, but with Alyssa's fed up, we're all fed up. Okay, last one. We're just gonna squeeze it in, then we'll be on page 5. Okay, sorry, I just realized, look, we're almost in standard form, almost. Oh, look at that, you guys are so smart. The only thing that's not in standard form is the 2. So if we add the 2 over, ta-da, we're in standard form. Okay, so we want a graph. Remember, we're going to choose the parabola tool. We want the vertex, and we want the y-intercept to graph. Good, so I already heard the vertex. It's -3, +2, because it's opposite h, same as k. But I also need a y-intercept. So that's when I plug in 0 for x. So if I plug in 0 for x and solve, I'm going to have 0 plus 3 is 3, squared is 9, 9 plus 2 is 11. So my y-intercept is 0, 11. Everybody agree with that? Okay, let's graph it. So we click on the tool. We do vertex first. And then it's like, okay, which way? How big? What do you want? And that's when we're going to click on 11. And then bam, it makes you a really nice little parabola, all done. Okay? Then if we find the axis of symmetry, remember that's just this imaginary line. Axis of symmetry is x equals h. And what was your h? -3. Okay, now it wants domain and range, but it's back being normal again. So we want interval notation. So we already know the domain. Now we have to come up with the range. What would our range be for this guy? He's going to start at 2, right? Hard bracket 2, and he's going to go all the way to where? Positive infinity. And there we go. Okay, that's perfect. That will get us through then to page 5, and we'll do that tomorrow.